Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Committee of the Whole meeting. Mayor Ireland, Council, Mr. Gibbon, and Administration, and guests, also to all of those that are viewing. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Jasper National Park and the Municipality of Jasper are on Treaty 6 and 8 territories, as well as Métis Region 4. This land is the traditional territory meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Dineza, Niaka, and the Shabi, Trishnik, Stony Nakota, and Métis. This Society of Jasper acknowledges the land in these territories to honour the relationship Indigenous people have with this land, to remind us of our responsibility and obligations to this place and to Indigenous people, and to affirm our accountability to address the ongoing impacts of colonisation and continue to affect Indigenous people today. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9:30. Additions to the agenda, Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller Anthony. Yesterday, Council received from administration a additional request for decision. So I'd like to add item 7.4, the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta grant application. And when we get to that point in the agenda, administration will provide us with the details regarding the wildlife mitigation strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Anything else to add to the agenda? Can I have somebody to approve the agenda with that addition? Councillor Demoda, all those in favor? Carried. August 8th, Committee of the Whole meetings were approved on August 15th. Is there any business arising from those minutes? Seeing as none, carry on to number 5, delegations, and I'll hand it over to CEO Gibbon to introduce our guests.
Your Worship, I'll actually let our guests introduce themselves. You'll see some documentation in the package that was submitted ahead of time. And so I'll turn it over to Ms. Stark.
Hi, I'm Kim Stark, and I just had a couple things I wanted to talk to Council about. So from my understanding is I have 3 minutes, so I'm going to jump right in. I did send some correspondence ahead. The parking zone downtown on Patricia Street was the #1 topic today I wanted to talk about. I drive down there every day when I go to work, and I find that the bus zone is constantly not filled with buses, but instead with individual cars. This becomes a problem for the bylaw officers. I've spoken with a few of them, and it is a very unenforceable spot. It then leads to buses not having a place to park, and they park in the driving lane. There's a little alleyway that connects the back alleys to Patricia Street. It does not have a name. I looked. It's a really high trafficked area for both businesses and people coming in and out of the grocery store, laundromats, yada, yada. When you try to exit from there, you then can't see past now 2 lanes of traffic, and you're crossing 2 pedestrian zones as well. I do have a solution, which I'll quickly jump ahead to and then take any questions as well. My solution is to have the buses move across and park in front of the totem pole. I understand it is a taxi zone at this time, and I used to be a taxi driver, so I'm not trying to take anything away from taxis. But having a large bus downtown is, in my opinion, not an excellent place for it to be. It also allows for people to be dropped right in the center of town, in front of the public washrooms, across from the information center, and also at 2 spots that recognize our Indigenous history, both the totem pole and the hopefully soon opened Athabasca Park. That's my little blurb.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. Any questions for Ms. Stark? Mayor Ireland.
Happy to jump in. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Stark, for the presentation. Fur is the name.
Oh, good.
It used to be part of my paper route.
So they each put a sign up.
I was waiting for that.
Well, there you go. Maybe they did. I appreciate the observations and the proposal. There was a time when the transportation master plan looked at this, and I wonder where that stands, if administration can, if not today, at another time, take a look at that. We recognize that transportation on Patricia Street is not the ideal spot for that. On the other hand, there are some uses there, including, I think, the shuttle to Marmot, where they sell the tickets in the kiosk, and it's convenient. And I also wonder whether, if there was a consideration to move things to Connaught, we would want to use the opposite side so that bus loads of pedestrians don't have to walk across Connaught, because that intersection is already problematic, with particularly for left turns, with so many cars and so many people on the crosswalk. We probably have to look soon at putting lights at that intersection. So I wouldn't want to complicate that, but I do appreciate the observations and coming with a proposal. That's always better than just coming with concerns and no proposal. And my very last question, photograph, the first photograph, is that little person on the dash intended to reflect anyone?
That's too funny. You know, that's Stadler and
Waldorf.
Wardle from the Muppets, the guys in the balcony.
Maybe you and me, I don't know.
Just, if I may, excellent idea to have, if you were to move something on the, I guess that would be maybe the north side of Connaught. Makes a great deal of sense for simplicity, as well as to the point of, absolutely, there's the Jasper Adventure Center, but they're not the only place that sells tickets in town. And an advantage from a municipality for one specific business perhaps is not always the greatest.
Yeah. Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP. I believe this would be a question for administration and possibly Director Nadon. We currently have 2 levels of compliance officers in bylaw, but I wonder if there's an opportunity for a 3rd level of compliance officer. We've been relatively successful this year with our parking revenues, but potentially a compliance officer whose sole duty was to monitor parking on Patricia by walking back and forth and ensuring the cars are paying, but also have that authority and also be addressed appropriately to encourage cars to move on, could try to alleviate some of that problem. We may actually even be able to pay for that position by ensuring that vehicles that are parked just beyond that in the 15-minute loading zone, or who are parked on the parking bulbs, also move along. I do know from driving a bus down that road and honking the horn to get people out of that, out of those parking areas. They'll move far enough away to get a bus in, but they'll still stay in the area. But if people are constantly encouraged to move on, I wonder if we might be perceived as being more proactive in keeping not just this area, but the people who park in front of the laundromat, in front of the bank, down when you mentioned 1 business or 2 businesses, they also, park on the parking bulbs, not in a parking stall, down closer to North Face or the retail stores. I'm wondering if for a summer job for an 18-year-old, that might be something, or a 17-year-old that could be that person who could help keep this particular street moving, but in a different way. Enforcement for parking, as well as, like I say, moving people along who are parked in areas they shouldn't be.
Councillor Tomoda?
Sorry, I had a question. That was my question to administration. Yeah.
Mr. Dunn?
Deputy Mayor Keller MP through the Councillor Melnick, thank you for the question. And so currently we have 2 peace officer positions. So community peace officers, which we are not we haven't changed our designation with the Solicitor General, and we haven't had council support or haven't requested council support yet for moving traffic violations. So that's the level of interaction that could happen now that we have peace officers that are certified under the province. I think what you're suggesting with that bus zone, if it relates to parking only, that is not considered a moving traffic violation, as in the vehicle is stopped somewhere where it shouldn't. So our bylaw officers is the next level down from that. So if you haven't yet gotten your peace officer designation, bylaw officer is the position that we would call that. And then we currently have a position in the department that is called municipal compliance officer. So that is typically the more junior position, but we are also assessing what kind of tasks are we asking those individuals to do, what kind of training do we provide them, and what kind of compensation are they getting for the risk that they're exposing themselves to by performing the duties. But that MCO, municipal compliance officer, would be akin to like a parking ambassador, might be a name for a position in other communities. And whether they enforce or not, or it's more like a communication piece and an education and encouraging people to move on, but not necessarily giving them the ability to ticket people. So there's a few different categories of staffing there that we could look at. But currently we have 2 peace officer positions, 1 municipal compliance officer, which is the more junior position, if you will. And as part of our budget submission for 2024 and forward, you will see that we are pitching a few different plans there, namely because the department has taken on significant new duties with paid parking, with sidewalk seating. So we're providing more and more services, but we still have the same number of staff as we had 3 or 4 years ago. So certainly that is a conversation that we would entertain. And placing them at the right level in terms of the duties that we expect them to do, how we compensate them and how we train them is something that I, as a director, take pretty seriously, as in I want to make sure that we set up people for success in their duties of enforcement there. So certainly a summer position is something that you will see. I don't want to, we just submitted our budget to finance. We haven't discussed it at SLT, that I can't commit to anything as to what will come in front of you or not, but it is certainly staffing and bylaw is something that we will come back with a proposal. And you're absolutely right that the way to increase bylaw presence downtown in the summer is to add more staff, and a summer position is definitely a possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Don. Councillor Dumont.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Keller-Ramsey. And thank you very much, Mr. Stark, for being here today and bringing this forward. I was part of the decision making when that zone was put in, that bus zone, and to refresh other people's memory and people that may not have been present at the time in the community. That was initially designed for rafting buses. The whole concept, because the rafting community came forward to us and seeing that loading and unloading people on the opposite side of the street into traffic was a safety concern, and I thought that was a valid concern. There are no longer any major rafting companies operating on Patricia Street, and even though at the time it was considered, the municipality and or council unfairly helping out other businesses, the primary concern was safety. And, having operated, working in other businesses, I was working for a bakery company, a local bakery company 3 years ago. And even during the pandemic, coming out of that alley, it was precarious, regardless if there were buses or not, like people traffic, car traffic, it was always an issue. So, I understand that we do have some business that might benefit from that operation there. I do like the proposal for the idea of having a bus zone where the taxi zone is. I think we can make those adjustments, and that to me is the smartest idea that has been brought to the table, and we've heard that one before, and I think it's worthwhile readdressing. And I think I like Councillor Melnick's idea of thinking outside the box, but I don't think that's the best use of our human resources in the municipality to be traffic or monitoring one spot when we can be using people to help out others or visitors in other areas. And I think it's a confrontational spot, and I don't think that we should continuously put our staff in that situation all summer long, and a lot of times in the winter too. So I'm supportive of changing this and moving, drop-offs in a different direction. And who knows that the current taxi zone could be the site of our very first bus stop in Jasper.
I'd like to see this come back to a committee of the whole and to invite our businesses on the Trigger Street that are actually involved within that zone. Working in the transportation companies myself. The shuttle from Jasper Park Lodge, Globus, many of the buses do their drop-offs there. A lot of seniors are on those buses. When they come back from trips, they drop them downtown, they go to the salon across the street, they go take up, they get to go from one tour to the other, they get tram shuttle, they get shuttle back to Jasper Park Lodge. And it seems to be the hub. And we do have a lot of seniors that go on those buses, that they're right down on the hub, they go from one tour to another. So I think, it's something I think that we really need to have a community conversation with the businesses downtown, because I remember many years ago, it came to council and it was before I was on council, but many of those companies came and said, no, we want the hub there because that's where the hustle and the bustle is, that's where the banks are, that's where the pharmacies are, and they wanted it. And there actually is a rafting company right down on Patricia Street also that pick up and drop off there. Councillor Melnick and then Councillor.
Well, I just wanted to finish my thoughts there. And I did explain coming out of the alley, but it's also an issue going in, as Ms. Stark has pointed out. And having operated a company that delivers that did deliver in that back alley, and representing a company that provided food service in that alley, and our drivers always had an issue making that right turn because of a lot of the things that Ms. Stark brought forward. So it's not just the businesses on the street that suffer. It's people getting in and out of the alley and businesses getting in and out of the alley. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
And I agree with you there, Councillor Demota. And I think another thing that would really make the street safe if we had a couple of flashing lights for people to cross at both sides, like on the entrances there, as we should have on Cannot Drive. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Eppie. I guess my question would be to administration then. We have a new bus service that's starting next month. Is that part of the current routes that we reviewed earlier this year?
That's a good question. Deputy Mayor Keller, MP for Councillor Melnick, the answer is no. Administration intentionally didn't identify that as a transit stop because of the congestion that's there. The transit stop that's identified in the downtown core, sort of our central location, is between the new Tourism Jasper Visitor Center and the Parks Canada Visitor Center. So on Patricia still, but between those, essentially right beside the Parks Canada Visitor Center and the old fire hall. So that's our central location and central hub for the municipal transit system.
Mr. Gibbon, is that by the crossing the post office or down more towards the Tourism Jasper and the parking lot?
Down on the what I'll call the north side of that intersection.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Stark, for coming today. I always appreciate when residents come with questions and also solutions, and I do agree with you. I feel like the downtown core has gotten busier and busier in the last few years with sidewalk seating. Seems like everyone's got big vehicles. It's a busy place. I don't drive a ton downtown, but I do drive sometimes, and I can never get out of that little fur street back onto Patricia. I do like the idea of moving that bus stop to Connaught on the other side. Patricia's a 2-lane road, Connaught's a 4-lane road. Like there's lots of space there. My question for administration is that bus parking only a certain length? Like, does it have to be a certain amount of space to be a bus stop only, like in front of the Tim Hortons, like where we're talking about?
Deputy Mayor Keller, MP through to Councillor Hall. I think there are operational considerations certainly to look at to make sure that there's enough room there for those buses to circulate in and out. I don't know that there is a set length. I think it depends on how much bus traffic we anticipate will be using that lane. sort of referring back to something Deputy Mayor Keller MP just said, there was a proposal by administration years ago. I believe Mr. Osborne was our licensing and enforcement manager at the time. And the proposal was to move it to the municipal public washrooms. So on Connaught Drive in front there. So it would be a less congested area and an area where the service could be offered, as in people could use the washrooms and get to wherever they need to go. And I will echo Deputy Mayor Keller MP's recollection of what happened is that several businesses came to council and essentially that swayed the vote the other way, where the concern was significant enough there. I think it's something the Traffic Advisory Committee, which is our internal committee, could look at and come up with a recommendation, but I think we will continue seeing different interests advocating for different outcomes. But certainly the size required is, if you want at least two large buses to fit in that bus drop-off zone, then that's quite a few parking stalls, right? Which downtown on Patricia specifically, that represents quite a few stalls.
Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, and this might be my last comment. I'm just reflecting on the comments by administration about adding now a second bus zone or another bus zone down Patricia. The comment about, it takes away a number of parking stalls. It would seem that if we don't move the one off Patricia, then we'll have two bus stalls. Both are going to have the same enforcement problems. So that end of Patricia is equally as busy. You can usually never get a parking stall along there. So I think your recommendation to move this to the committee of the whole is probably appropriate, to have continued discussion, take a look at the transportation study that was made, and then try to pull the comments from Ms. Stark, which again, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation and bringing this forward. I think it would be prudent for us to maybe dwell on this and take a look at all of the information and look at all of the solutions that could be viable.
Okay, Listener, wanted to say something, and then I'll go back to you, Councillor Hall. Go ahead.
I just wanted to be clear on something, that what I am suggesting is moving the whole hub so that all buses and drop-offs to address the senior situation, which ironically, my next thing, you're going to know that I'm totally on board with the senior thing. So moving the whole hub to where the mayor suggested, I think is fabulous, especially because it is neutral. It gives every business, regardless of location, a fair advantage or disadvantage. And also what I think is really important for our visitors is that they have access to public washrooms, park information, and information about the Indigenous people from this area. And it's literally right there. I think that's something that shouldn't be overlooked in that location, and I think it's super important.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to follow up. I love the idea of moving it to Connaught Drive. I think it's a bigger space. The church is very, very busy. I don't know if it's been, I don't know what everyone else feels, as it feels busier to me in the last 5 to 10 years, way, way busier downtown. And I love all your points of just neutrality. And I also love your points about the Indigenous display, totem pole, it's all right there. I guess we have to move this to look at it closely, but I do think that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Zamota.
Yes, I really like the idea of having a broader spitball session on this. That's what I like to call committee of the whole. But because we are in committee of the whole, just to think of something forward, I had to go and upload Google Maps again here, Google Earth, just to look at the street configurations here in town. And right in front of the Two Brothers totem pole, it has already been zoned off, I think, for bus. But there's taxi zone across the street, so they're on both sides. I can't remember. I remember the taxi zone being right in front of the information center, but right in front of the Two Brothers, there's an extended zone. It looks like maybe at least 2 buses can fit in there, and that could be consideration of the hub. Another spot is great ideas in front of the public washrooms. I mean, these places might not be the most suitable in the wintertime, but definitely during our most congested, visitation times of the summer, I think peak would offer some better solutions for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kamara. Any other questions? I can have a motion to accept the report. Councillor Melnick.
I would like to recommend that committee refer agenda item 5.1A to a future committee of the whole for further discussion with administration regarding the merits of moving the current downtown bus transit zone, encompassing, of course, all of our discussions here.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Any debate on Councillor Melnick's motion? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor RCMP. Just to speak to the motion, I'm in favor of exactly that move. So refer the matter to administration first to come back to committee of the whole with a report. But since we're on the subject, I would prefer that the report also deal with other aspects of that for Patricia intersection. So not just moving the bus location, because if you look at the second, I think it is, of the photographs, you will see that there are yellow lines painted on both sides of Fur. And although I rarely drive there, I have to weave with my bike between cars that habitually park on both sides of that already narrow street. There is one business in the vicinity that seems to be a magnet for people who like to park like that, on the assumption that they can just run in and run right back out. So there is a secondary issue, even if we move the bus parking. That street is difficult, compounded by the fact that semi-trailer units regularly use that lane, and I think are regularly in violation of a rule under the Traffic Safety Act that you're not supposed to back across crosswalks, and yet there are 2 crosswalks in there where there is no option. So trucks beneath my office are tooting all the time as they back up across an intersection that is absolutely blind, and may also have cars parked on yellow lines. So while I accept the motion with respect to looking at the bus parking on Patricia, I think we have to come up with a strategy for, I think, must be enforcement of the yellow line prohibited parking on Fur, and it's all in the same area. So I just want to have that considered in anything that the administration might bring forward, to look at the whole picture, not just part of the picture.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Please accept that as friendly amendment.
Yep, I would accept that as a friendly amendment, and in the spirit of that, Patricia is the problem. The bus parking itself is part of the problem. And so, as I alluded earlier, I think looking at all of Patricia is important.
Thank you. Councillor Melnick, CEO Gibbon.
Sure. So just to ensure that administration has some clarity, the motion that I heard Councillor Melnick make was to refer the matter to a future CEO committee of the whole for further discussion. I then heard Mayor Ireland say a report back. And so I need some clarity of whether council wants to report back or council wants to discuss it more and decide what direction to give. So you just need that clarity. And if council wants to report back, I guess for administration, because there's at least 3 or 4 different issues involved here, you would need some specificity about what issues particularly do you want us to write a report on. So Councillor Melnick identified, the delegate identified the bus zone on Patricia Street. I've heard a couple of different references to the bus zone being the thing, all of Patricia Street being the thing, Patricia Street and Fur being the thing, enforcement being. So we need some clarity if council wants to report, or council could refer it to a future committee of the whole, have a bit more discussion about these issues, take some time to think about them, and then decide what direction to give the administration. So if you're giving direction today, need to be very specific so we can hit the mark. Or maybe you want to take some time to think about it, and then at that future committee meeting, have your thoughts collected so you could give us specific direction. Administration is fine either way, happy to respond. But I think that clarity enable us to give you a better response when you ask it.
Councillor Melnick.
With your permission, Deputy Mayor Keller MP, and support hopefully from Mayor Island, perhaps for clarity for administration, we refer this to the Tuesday, September 12th Committee of the Whole for future or for additional council discussion, so that then we can give administration the clarity to write the report to come back to a future Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Councillor Demota.
I think more discussion is deserved here. I think administration is asking for a specific motion. So
Go ahead, Mr. Gibbon.
Yeah, if I may, I think this, so if I understand this motion, it sounds like the intent is to say, okay, council has received input from the public, take that away, we'll think about it, we'll discuss it in more detail at the next Committee of the Whole meeting, September 12th, and then at that time, council would be in a position to direct administration to do so. So I'm comfortable that the intent here is to define what administration wouldn't show up at that meeting with any reports or pre-work done. We would have a chance to be a little bit more informed. So as you discussed, we could share some additional ideas. But I'm understanding that this motion doesn't request anything specific from administration in advance of the September 12th meeting. Just to add it to the agenda. So there's a space for discussion time.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Mayor Ireland, you happy with that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. I can live with it, but it just seems to me that we've been made aware of the issue. Like all issues, it's never entirely isolated. There are all sorts of ramifications. It seems to me that without some operational guidance, we will be right back where we are now on September 12th. I can live with that, but I would be more inclined to put this off to a future Committee of the Whole with a recommendation coming from administration with respect to a number of issues. But that's where we're colliding right now. What are those issues? But if we come back on September 12th, without that, for example, Director Don reminded me today about the auction at the public washroom at the end of the month. And I want those sorts of operational issues before us. Otherwise, it seems to me we're sort of spinning our wheels. We will need a report before we make a decision on this. Could we not request that today? If we can't, we can do this again on September 12th and try and refine what it is we need from administration. That's fine, but I think we're going to be right back there on September 12th. 3 weeks from now, we will be where we are now, wondering what it is we should ask administration to look at.
Councillor Demota.
thank you. I believe that Councillor Waxer also had it for hand, but I will just quickly, because this regards the motion. I knew that we were working on a terms of reference at one point to reinstate the Traffic Advisory Committee. I might be mistaken, but through you to Ms. Nadon, is there any consideration of that coming forward, or is there the ability to strike an ad hoc committee at the time to review certain things?
Deputy Mayor Keller MP through to Councillor Demota, that was an item and it came back to council. It came back to council and I believe council accepted administration's recommendation that it should be an administrative committee. And terms of reference are written, have been approved by the CAO, and the committee is operational and functioning as an internal committee. So it does exist, it is functional, and it's a committee made up of staff.
Thank you, Mr. Don. Councillor Waxer.
I just wanted to say that I agree with the Mayor Ireland, that having information prior to coming back is important.
Councillor Zavala.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. I wasn't really concerned with the construct of the committee, but if we have an opportunity to, refer this to that committee and then have the information come back to us, because I think it's made up of the people that have the best knowledge of, the layout and a potential plan forward. Thank you.
Councillor Melnick.
Well, thank you. In the spirit of council's desire to return to the next committee of the whole with a report, the motion intent is not just to address her and that corner at Patricia. My motion's intent was to look at the whole length of Patricia, past her, and including her. Mayor Ireland referred to the alleyway, which is a whole separate thing. So we're asking administration to come back. I think looking at the entire length of Patricia, her as it connects to the alleyway, and to come back with recommendations. And if Mr. Gibbon, that is the clarity that administration is going to need. However, my motion would be amended. Would that assist administration?
Councillor Melnick, we don't expect this report to come back on September 12th. It would be a future committee.
Sure, we can take this at the 12th date out for the benefit of administration to have the time to look at it properly.
Councillor Devada.
Thank you very much. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think for everyone's clarity, I would like to have the motion reread so it's specific, it gives direction, so that it's not like a misunderstanding here and there. I think that's kind of what we decided we were going to do at one point, and I think if we're going to give administration direction from council, it should be clear and concise. No offense.
Thank you, Councillor Devada.
So in order to do that, I'd like to request a 5-minute recess to actually pen the motion. And that way, for the clarity that Councillor DeMote is looking for, we can then have the motion that's clear, concise, and direct administration without being fuzzy around the outside.
Great. I will call a 7-minute recess. We will reconvene at 10:15. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back to the meeting. I call the meeting back at 10:16, and I will call on Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, and upon reflection and for the purposes of clarity, I think the original motion should be withdrawn. And also we have in our motion action list, I see we have also a report coming back to us regarding the Connaught Drive crosswalks and the safety concerns on Connaught Drive, which was referred back to operations and protective services. Where I'm going with this is that we've had this particular item presented to council, and while an immediate solution might be desired, I think I would make the motion that we accept the the concerns of the resident and refer it to administration to consider with other safety concerns for presentation back to the committee of the whole, not giving any parameters of how far, how much, which corners, but have administration look at other safety concerns within the downtown core. And just as a commentary to that, we do have a 2018 transportation plan that may be referred to in administration's deliberations as to the report that will come back to us. But I think it gives administration the opportunity to consider this holistically as safety concerns in the downtown core, which they're already looking at on Canaan.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Any questions for Councillor Melnick? And is everybody in favor of his recommendations? Mayor Ireland.
One very technical point. Councillor Melnick indicated he wished to withdraw the motion. That can certainly happen in the absence of objection from any other council. So I think it's appropriate as chair that you just confirm that there is no objection to withdrawing a motion that was properly before us.
Is everybody okay with that?
Thank you for that. And then secondly, the new motion, while I will vote in favor of that, I agree that it is dangerous to try and piecemeal solutions, particularly in something as broad as transportation. Moving a location of one element may solve a problem in one area and move it elsewhere. So I think we should look at this holistically. And I just wonder from administration whether there are other matters in the works and whether the motion as now worded gives administration the type of direction that it requires.
Your worship, I think it does. And first, thanks council for taking that time. Appreciate you want to be responsive to residents when you hear from them. And administration certainly wants to be able to support that. The motion as it's worded, I think would allow us to most likely bring this matter back when we bring back the crosswalks. That's targeted for September, so really around the same timeline. Administration was already preparing, likely to recommend an update to the transportation master plan. That is an older document, and quite a lot has happened since 2018 in terms of how we use our streets. And so there are a number of different matters, C2 Connaught Drive, crosswalks, all these matters that were raised today that are probably best reviewed in a comprehensive manner like that. But we can bring you that, we can look at these issues as well as the ones that are already on the books and make some recommendations to you when we come back in September.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Any questions for Councillor Melnick and Mr. Gibbon? Or a question, Councillor Demona.
Although I just, wasn't your motion withdrawn, or do we have a new one on that? Okay, I apologize. It's been a bit of ping pong in my head. I'll wait till the motion's done and then I'll make my comments after.
Okay. Is there any debate on the motion?
I have no further comments. I think administration is clear with where the motion is going, and I have no close.
Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed? That is carried. Councillor Demota.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that you had a really good point, Deputy Mayor, on consultation with the businesses, but I think because of the changes that this kind of affects things more broadly, and I just hope that if there are concerns that businesses might want to confer with their representatives, and I hope that from administration's point of view that we have, I believe, a valve to an avenue to address comments, and that we consider the issues that might arise from changes in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calgary. While I agree with those comments, I think that we should likely presume that when administration comes back, part of whatever recommendation we would get would be to not overlook public engagement and communication.
Absolutely.
It's typical of administration to do that. And I appreciate that. They know how to do that part of their job, and so I'm expecting that will be part of it.
100%.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'm going to hand it back to you, Ms. Stark, for your second presentation.
Gosh, sorry about all that. First off, I only again have my 3 minutes, but I want to take a moment to say, wow, I've never had the opportunity to watch or be part of. I'm busy, everybody's busy, so I don't really take the time, but you guys are amazing that you sit here and do this and you have the patience and the forethought and the analytical. Wow, that's all I just want to say. Okay, so my other idea, super passionate about it. Indoor track. I know it's been kicked around before. I want to start with where my inspiration for this come from, and that is Dave Marcus, my fellow firefighter for many years. I see Dave out walking and trying so hard in the middle of winter to keep up his fitness after, you know, some personal surgeries or whatever is happening. And, you know, he's got his spikes on, he's got a stick with spikes, and it's -5 million. And then a day like today is also a perfect example. I am a runner. I run a lot. I'll run in anything. I've run in -47, I've run in +47. But smoke like this, even if you're not running, if you're just walking, this is an issue and this isn't going away. I wish it was. So to have a space that we could have for everybody, seniors, which everybody in this room one day will be one. Also for young parents, there's not a lot of places in the winter to take your toddlers. I speak from experience. Then again, people with mobility challenges, wheelchairs, there's, you know, all these other issues that the streets here, the snow, the ice, they're problematic. So I would like very much, again, I have an idea. I had reached out to the councillors in April via email, and I did reach out, and Mr. Melniak, Ralph, got back to me, and Deputy Mayor Helen sat in as well, and we had a nice conversation. I've talked a lot in the community about it, and I've never heard anybody say, whoa, that's a bad idea. I know it was kicked around above the arena, and I think that might not be a feasible option due to cost, but my other thought is above the gymnastics space in the activity center. My understanding is with this round of renovations, there'll be elevator access, which opens it up to some of the mobility challenged and perhaps seniors or others. And I'm not a gymnastics person, but I don't think that higher ceiling is used in that space. So just to have somebody, looks like you make committees to make things to see if it's feasible. I think that's the gist. Look at it to see if that is possible to make it happen. I think this would be so beneficial. Our schools too, we don't even have track and field here. And we could have a track, so we can have track and field and school spirit. And it's a cost-effective thing for kids to get involved in. That's not millions of dollars and having to travel to ski hills and hockey. And we have a lot of communities in this, or families in this community that are, you know, not making lots of dollars. And they have kids too that deserve an option for a sport that doesn't cost so much. I think I'm out of time, so I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Ms. Stark. Thank you, Ms. Stark. Questions? So can I ask you your vision? So above the gymnastics area.
Yeah, so speaking with Ralph, the idea kind of came out was it's a long, narrow space. And again, I've never pieced this off. These are just ideas, but if I don't tell them to somebody who has the power to do something, it's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, perhaps a long, narrow space there, and it would not be impossible to add some natural light through punching out some windows in the masonry. I don't want to take away from curlers. I know curling is popular and it brings bonspiels and in our off season and other people enjoy that activity. And I'm not going to suggest removing anything from anybody, but I don't know if I mean, it used to all be a curling rink. So perhaps there could be a way to use part of the space over part of the curling ice that is left. Again, I'm not an engineer, I'm a baker who runs, but that's kind of, you know, and I did sit down with the senior advocacy people, Betsy Ann in particularly yesterday. That's where the idea we kind of were ballparking things, and they're extremely supportive of this concept.
Thank you. I think it's a great concept. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you again, Ms. Stark, for coming with this. I think it's a great idea. I travel lots in the winter with my son for hockey, and there's a wonderful arena in Drayton Valley that has an indoor track above the ice, and we get a kilometer in between periods. Like it's cool, and I love the idea. I'm just not sure where it would go, how much it would cost. Like I know there's a lot of those factors. I do support it. I wonder if I'm not even sure what kind of motion we can make here, or what we could do with this, because I think we looked at this about the arena, didn't we? Did during I think my first year, the term when the renovations were happening. I just don't know if it's feasible there. I don't know if we looked at it around the gymnastics facility though.
I guess I was just hoping that, I know everything costs money, but just if we don't know what it could cost or if it was feasible, then you can't have the dream. So if you can get those numbers, like, trust me, I'm busy. I volunteer as a firefighter. I got businesses, I got kids, but I'm passionate about this, that I would be willing to help spearhead fundraising and grants and whatever it takes, because I really believe in this as an option.
Councillor Damota.
I apologize to my fellow councillors that have heard this story before, but 4 years ago around this time, actually today, 4 years ago, I was in Estevan, Saskatchewan, and first time visiting the Affinity Center. You know, fortunately for them, they have a junior hockey team there, the Estevan Bruins, so they, you know, they can get sponsorship, and they built this fantastic facility, and I was mesmerized by it. It had a track inside, and people were using it. Moms were pushing kids on strollers at different times. People were running in there too. It was winter time, or no, sorry, I was also there in the winter time and saw, you know, good use of it. So there are a lot of valid points that we could be addressing in our community. I did bring up the idea of getting some external sponsorship to name our facilities for different reasons, and I think there's opportunities there. But I think thinking outside the box again, or inside the box for something new, would be a good idea somewhere, even if we can't do it in the recommended spots. I think there are opportunities, even small ones, that could help, you know, our main goal of community health. And I think that's a good thing to branch off of. So there's opportunities to broaden our thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Damota. Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Ramsey, and thank you again, Ms. Stark. I too, at least in a past life, was a runner, and I still enjoy the sport, and I totally agree that more options we can give for residents to have a healthy lifestyle, the better we will all be. You indicated it's a low cost sport for a lot of kids, and I think your words were, it doesn't cost $1 million, but I think it does. It's, you know, that would be an expensive proposition, and the space is not as large as the 4 sheets of curling ice that used to be there, because the home end has now got some construction for storage for the gymnastics club and other things. So it is a smaller space than it might appear. Doesn't mean that it's not feasible. Joining it to the existing curling ice seems to me problematic, because air temperature is going to be different. If it's an indoor space for winter, curlers need ice, and gymnasts, I assume, might like it a little bit warmer. So that could be problematic. So the first thing, it seems to me, if we want to take this further, is whether or not we could fund a feasibility study. I have no idea what a feasibility study would cost, but we would have to look at, I mean, engineers would have to see whether a track could be cantilevered off the existing structural posts that support that. And through that, we would get perhaps some vague estimate of what it's going to cost if we proceeded, but we never know. But I would be inclined, if council has an appetite to consider this further, to consider firstly in our upcoming budget discussions funding the feasibility study, because that's going to be the first effort. And I don't know what we might be looking at in terms of cost for a feasibility study, but we can't jump into building a track with an unknown price tag without knowing whether it's even feasible. So I would be inclined to say that at budget time, we should look at whether or not we want to commit funds to a feasibility study to see where this is going. As much as I would like to see such an attribute in our community, it's going to be a challenge, but still, I appreciate that you brought it forward. There are lots of challenges. This is another one, and thanks for your interest in it.
Councillor Waxman.
I too see great value in an indoor track, and would hope that we make the feasibility study as broad as possible and not limited to the concept of over the gymnastics area, that there may be other possibilities that would be more effective or more appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Waxman. Can a councillor make a motion to accept the report and direct this feasibility study towards the 2024 budget? Whatever you said. Councillor Hall?
I would make that motion that we move to accept this report or this presentation for information and the other things that Deputy Mayor Keller represented.
And we ask administration at time of the 2024 project to bring forth the feasibility study for an indoor track within the municipal buildings. Yeah, okay, and you kind of definitely.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Well, just going to, before council makes that decision, just some very quick feasibility checking. A quick search of indoor running track dimensions. So a typical indoor running track, which would be a 200-meter running track, which is actually smaller than a typical competition outdoor running track is 400 meters. So a indoor running track obviously is smaller. These athletes have to go around more times, more corners, but no big deal. So those running tracks are typically 46 meters wide by 88 meters long. Looking at our facility, the gymnastics facility is about 19 meters wide by 40 meters long. So it's a less than half the size of a indoor track. So in terms of what's feasible within that existing facility, it would not be anything that would be used for competition. My suggestion would be, and again, without any additional research, your likely thing that you could expect would be a couple of lanes on an elevated platform that would give indoor running space. It'd be very tight corners because it doesn't have the width that running tracks would typically have. So in terms of what a reasonable expectation is, it would be quite limited. And that doesn't mean that it's impossible. It means that what we could do within the footprint of that building would be much very squished. You know, you would get a running surface, but it'd be quite squished and it wouldn't be as long, probably about half the size of a typical indoor running track. So that's, in terms of feasibility, that's a pretty high level. That's probably a class Z feasibility estimate. If council wished to refer the matter or sort of any further, you know, administration maybe could provide a report back first on the concept, maybe detailing what I've just presented and with some additional information. And then you might want to decide whether you'd want to consider a feasibility study, because possible that spending $20,000 or $30,000 to get somebody to tell you these things in 2024, you may be able to identify at a very high level some things that would help you decide how to approach this earlier.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbon. Ms. Starr.
Hi, so I just want to be clear that although running is my passion, that's not the whole intent of the space. It's for everybody and all ages and all disciplines, if you will. Furthermore, I mean, pipe dreams of a 400-meter track outside at school, and I'm working on that too. And I also have one maybe around the soccer fields with artificial turf, and I'm going to work on that one as well. However, in the interim, if it had to be something squished, okay, maybe we look back at the arena situation. Maybe that's an option. I am sorry I don't have such a precise solution as I perhaps did for the parking, but I'm also going to throw out the idea. I used to run in a place called the Gritty Grotto underneath the University of Manitoba, and it was a track in the basement with dirt walls, which as a spitter, I really appreciated. However, you know, I just looking in all directions basically as options, because we do have a very small footprint of where we can go and what we can do, but the imaginations of everybody in this room, if used for the benefit of all, could really take us far. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Starr. Councillor Dumont.
I too trained in the grotto. It was better at Maxwell Center when you actually got to use the track. But there are a lot of solutions out there. You know, just on a quick look online, there's companies that can find area little loop tracks that are quite narrow. But you know, we can think outside too. I mean, there might be opportunities on our town trail. We might have the first domed walking track. You just got to think about different things. If we get a 50-meter section somewhere that could be changed. I know the idea is to get inside or get out of the smoke, but there are a lot of creative solutions out there. And you know, maybe somebody that's smarter than us that does this for a living can come up with some interesting solutions. So I'm for exploring this, and I think it really does promote community health, and it's something that we could use in the wintertime, especially.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do have a motion on the table, but I'm very happy for any of my council colleagues to friendly amend it.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. I just want to return to comments of Mr. Gibbon and clarify in my mind a suggestion, which I think was the concept filter before a feasibility study, because the feasibility study might tell us what we might find out for ourselves, and we'd have to pay many dollars to get it. So can you just clarify to me what you're suggesting by way of concept filter to be applied first, and how that can be configured?
Your worship, through Deputy Mayor Keller MP, I think really this is a good example of the new input that's been brought to the table by a resident, of referring that matter to administration for a report back to committee. Is probably the most direct step that you can take, and then administration can come up, you know, can have a chance to consider the matter and bring, you know, think about potential alternatives and potential recommendations on how to, you know, to give council options to advance the matter, some of which might include additional money for feasibility or planning, but at least taking some time for administration to be able to consider the matter and come back to you with recommendations on what's possible and potential approaches and alternatives.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I withdraw my motion, make a new one, or I see Mayor Island writing down quickly, so maybe I'll give him some time to amend my motion.
I saw where you were going with that.
Pretty good, yeah. Like,
You
are next to each other.
There is a motion that started at least, which was clear at the begin, to accept the presentation as information. And then when she said it. And so what I heard her say then was to accept the presentation as information, to refer the matter to administration with the intent to provide a recommendation to council in order to consider possibility of funding a feasibility study in the 2024 budget deliberations. So 3 steps: accept the presentation for information, refer it to administration, who will come back to council by budget time with an indication of whether or not a feasibility study is warranted, and council consider whether a feasibility study ought to be funded in the budget. I think that's where we got to. So that's your motion.
I accept that amendment.
Any discussions or questions? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Stark. Thank you for coming out this morning and sharing all your great ideas with us.
Thanks for putting up with me, and enjoy the rest of your meeting. Bye.
And thank you for suggesting that some of us are not yet seniors.
Just as a point of clarity, do I still get the discount?
Correspondence, the RCMP quarterly report is in front of us from Sergeant Daisy. If we have any questions or concerns, Ms. Nathan is quite happy to bring them back to Sergeant Daisy and get us some clarification. Ms. Nathan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. You are correct. Sergeant Bedese is not in attendance, but if you would like to see him at any time, he would be happy to come. It's just from an operational perspective, it's sometimes difficult for him to schedule that. But if I can provide a few highlights on the report, and that also reflects some conversations and ongoing relationship building that I'm engaging in with Sergeant Bedese. Balancing the needs for events and different things that are happening in the summertime while continuing to providing policing services when we are very busy as a town is continues to be a challenge, but something that the RCMP team continues to make it happen, for lack of better words. And also the presence of the red surge is something that they really tried to emphasize this summer. And as you can imagine, responding to any operational calls when you're dressed in red surge is not exactly easy. So they have to have enough staff on shift at the same time. So one of them can be dressed up in red surge and not impact operations. And so you see the highlights here of how they've engaged in the community connection. So which meetings and which events they've taken part of over the summer, as well as the community priorities being education and enforcement to reduce driving complaints. So of course, moving traffic violations continue to be a large aspect of their response, including response to motor vehicle collisions. So alongside the fire department, that takes up quite a bit of their time, and they also respond throughout the national park. So getting to those scenes is time consuming sometimes. And then the police visibility is the red surge part that I just mentioned. And going back to a question from Mayor Ireland on previous reports around crime statistics and how we compare to other communities. So you see here charts and data for Jasper specifically. I can forward to council on email a website that actually lists all the communities in Alberta, and that shows what their trends are. So if you'd be interested in comparing the levels of calls for service and response and crime statistics, that is all available online. So I can forward that to you on email.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nadon. Questions or comments? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. I have two questions that I would ask Mr. Don related to Sergeant Padesi, and then some other comments that I would also ask be relayed. Firstly, on the questions, the report indicates that there are 9 established positions other than support staff for the community. And I wonder whether we could get confirmation from Sergeant Padesi, the metrics that are used to determine that those are the number of positions for Jasper. And I ask that in combination with the second question, which is he's given us the statistical breakdown year over year. I wonder whether he has information that can be made public that differentiates between those charges laid against people with a Jasper address and those laid against people without a Jasper address. He does indicate at some point in his report, of course, that they have to police the visitor population. And I'm assuming that the 9 positions are predicated on a residential population. And I'd like to know the split between the number of tickets issued to residents and those issued to visitors. So those are the 2 questions. And then the comments I would like to pass on to Sergeant Padesi publicly, and I will pass these on when I see him next on the street. But I really do appreciate his involvement in community. I think it would have been thrilling for members of the Jasper ski team to get a radar gun on them up at Marmot. And apparently he assisted in that, so that's great, or at least the detachment did. He's helped considerably with the hosting of important events for the community, including the half marathon and the Grand Bondo. He and members of his detachment regularly show up in Red Surge for things like graduation and flag raisings. And those are all really important community connections. And I'm proud that our detachment engages with the community in that fashion. And I wanted to make a particular comment about the musical ride that was here. And Sergeant Padesi was one of the group that attended the pipe ceremony that was held that day. And that was impressive. And he does note that it was a matter related to reconciliation. And I think it went a long ways, given that there is tension in that history between the RCMP and Indigenous people. But I thought he was doing all that he could do to show a real attitude of reconciliation, and I wanted to draw that to public attention and credit Sergeant Padesi for that. So if you can pass all those along, I would be appreciative.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Councillor Maloney.
It's very difficult to follow the mayor up when he's expressing such insight, and I really appreciate that and address many of the things that I wanted to say. So to branch off from that and to segue off of radar guns and maybe a previous discussion with the Traffic Advisory Committee, through you, Deputy Mayor, to administration. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity or have there been discussions regarding enforcement of speed in the community? And I'm only saying that from my personal observation. I do walk the sidewalks a lot, and I know from anecdotal experience that you can't really tell how fast a vehicle is going without having a device to tell you specifically. Sometimes you have those radar signs up on that will show the speed vehicles are going, and because there's one across right from my house, a lot of the times I'm seeing that people don't even care about that sign anymore. So they're doing speeds that are well beyond the maximum speed limit in those zones, and residents have been expressing that there is some frustration on that side. So I'm a believer that the law isn't really a law unless it's enforceable. And I believe I heard someone next to me at one point say that. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity, or have there been measures taken to investigate or address having some enforcement in our community so that we can take proactive steps in slowing traffic down. Thank you.
Listen down.
Deputy Mayor Keller MP through to Councillor Demota. As I sort of touched on earlier around the enforcement conversation, with the change in peace officer designations, we now have community peace officer 1 employer status. So our staff is trained to be able to enforce moving traffic violations. So that is relatively new to our organization. About a year and a half ago, we became a designated employer. So how would we maximize the use of our trained staff and improve our service delivery? Moving towards moving traffic violation is certainly a possibility. How administration would bring this forward to council for discussion, like we would need your support. That would be a change in service level. That would require council direction, as in it's a service that we're not currently providing, and we would need to document that formally, and then the steps that would follow. So say we did have a clear direction from council that you want us to move in that direction. The first step would be to apply to the Solicitor General to change our designation to include moving traffic violations as part of our officers' designations, which is mostly an administrative process. Like I said, they are trained, so they could do it. And then in terms of equipment and equipping our vehicles with radar and LiDAR is the other terminology that they use, which is light detection and ranging, which I can't provide you too much details around that, but Mr. Jones probably could. We've been costing out what that would look like, and currently, and again, that's subject to change in the future, capital budgeting currently is a bit challenging due to inflation and demand for equipment. You're looking at about $25,000 to equip a vehicle with radar and LiDAR technology, which would then give us the ability to enforce moving traffic violations. We did implement in 2023 e-ticketing. So that was one of our capital projects. So we are now compliant with the province and the way they want ticketing submitted. So we have a lot of pieces in place, but we would need formal direction from council to move in that direction. So whether you direct us to do that or we come to you with a request to consider it is something to look at. But yeah, changing our designation, purchasing radar LiDAR equipment. And there's probably a few more pieces, but that is something that we're looking at. But in a nutshell, that's what would be required to move to moving traffic violations. And I think currently the RCMP is the only agency that is in a position to do that. And just the demand for service and in terms of prioritizing the calls that they get, moving traffic violations in town is just not, it rarely rises to the top of the priorities that they are asked to address in the context of policing in Jasper.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Councillor Demota.
Thank you, and I apologize. That's not the direction I was going in, because we were, and I could see in my line of questioning, I wasn't very clear in my ask. So because we were on the topic of the RCMP, and we do have an agency that does have the equipment and the trained staff to do that, I understand it might not be a priority, but because they are law enforcement and they do have that under their purview, I was just wondering if there were ever any discussions at the traffic advisory committee. I don't even know if the RCMP are part of that on the regular discussions, but in partnership with another agency in our community, I was wondering if that is an avenue, or has that avenue been considered to approach? And I'm looking at more of a safety issue in the community, and I'm not looking at expanding our services within the municipality. I was just if the RCMP are able and willing to do that. And I guess if they were, they would be doing it. But I think that if we had a little bit more enforcement in the community with the agencies that are there right now, we might be able to mitigate some of this growing concern.
CEO Griffin.
And thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP. And Councillor Demota's point is understood. I think what we're seeing in the report from the RCMP here is really a capacity issue and likely a prioritization due to capacity concerns. And so they certainly have that authority today. Safety is a concern for the priority. And as Director Nadon said, they're called on to do everything from ceremonial duties to other types of criminal code violations and that may be higher priority than moving violations. And so from an administrative perspective, one thing that's been in the back of our mind is what are we in control of? We certainly aren't in control, direct control of how many RCMP members the RCMP have. That's certainly something that council has an opportunity to advocate for, and I believe we've organized a meeting with K Division at the Alberta Municipalities meeting, so you'll have a chance to speak to K Division and likely the Solicitor General's office for the province of Alberta and make the case that Alberta and the RCMP should provide more members here in our detachment. So there's an opportunity for you to influence, but not necessarily control. One thing that we are in control of in Jasper is our staffing and the way that we use our staff. And so that's, I think, what Director Nadon's reference to. We're aware of this capacity issue, and we're thinking, what could we do that's within our control, direct control, and we may bring something forward to you, at a future point. So I think completely understood. I think it really comes down to how many people are there and what can they spend their time doing and what demands their attention. And I think that's reflected in the numbers that you see in the report from Sergeant Daisy.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A couple things. I'm kind of touching back on Mayor Ireland's comments about the radar gun at the ski hill. I think that's amazing. They've also, the last couple of falls have come to, we'll host girls hockey tournaments, have a skills comp in the middle of the day, and they've come to the ice and use the radar gun on the girls and how fast they go. It's super cool. Probably 20 years ago, I was at the ski hill and was able to partake in one of the radar gun down the gully of the knob. I think I got to 98 kilometers an hour, couldn't quite break 100. Don't know why. Councillor Demota's comments about speeding on Benum, particularly Benum. First, the only people that care about that flashing sign are the cyclists who are trying to get to 30, just so people do care about that. There are ways to slow traffic besides a radar gun and flashing signs, and that's narrowing of the streets. And there's a reason that going 60 on Connaught feels way faster than going 60 on Benum. It's because it's really narrow and there's sidewalk seating, and it just feels weird to go that fast there, whereas Benum's wide open. So I don't know if this is the conversation to have right now, but there are other ways to slow traffic on Benum that doesn't involve, ticketing people. You can narrow that street somehow, put flaggers up or whatever. Yeah, but this is a great report, and I really appreciate seeing the RCMP out in their red surge in the summertime. It's for a national park, and it's part of our history, and it seems to be very fitting and suiting to see them walking around in the daytime in the summer.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Just on one of your points there, I've gone to some other small town, they have speed bumps. They have, and they put them in and take them out because in winter time it becomes with the clearing of the roads. But I've gone to communities where they have speed bumps put in, especially where they're high traffic area with kids, and this seems to be very effective. Can I have sorry, Councillor Wagner.
Thank you. My only question was whether Mayor Ireland's request for more information, I heard distinctly the word ticket, but I also wondered if your request for further information around visitors to the community would include responses to domestic disputes and assaults in bars and things like that. I think that would be also very interesting information around the additional burden of policing in a community that welcomes so many visitors.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer and Mayor Ireland.
And thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, and thank you, Councillor Waxer. I hadn't intended to include that, but I think it's a great addition. So my intent, and I use both word charge and ticket because it could be different, and I wanted to get statistics on that. But a response that doesn't get resolved by issuing a ticket or a charge is also taking the RCMP time, and I appreciate that nuance. So that would be part of my request. Absolutely, thank you.
May I have a councillor that will make a motion to receive the report?
Just before I do that, there's one other issue. It goes to safety, and I know that next month we will be getting a report concerning safety on Connaught Street sidewalks. And while I appreciate that there can be physical attributes that calm traffic, sometimes I think enforcement is needed as well, particularly on Connaught as vehicles prepare to exit at the west, and the speeds along Connaught starting in the 700 block and going through the 800 and 900 blocks are exceptionally fast. And so I wonder, in terms of calming that, whether that report that we will get next month might consider any aspects of photo radar. So rather than having officers who have to have a vehicle equipped with a radar and actually play the ticket, there are many communities that use photo radar, and I'm going to bet that there are lots of people in Jasper who no longer speed through Edson, courtesy of photo radar. And so it's just one more tool. We looked at it previously, this council, but at that time, funding for RCMP was different, and because we were under 5,000 population, all the revenue from photo radar would go directly to the province. And I don't know whether now that is proportional, because we are paying a proportion of RCMP fees. So just an alert that when we have this discussion about safety on Connaught, that is a matter of interest to me, and I'm happy to raise it then, but just an alert to administration that is likely to be a question that I will ask when we look at safety measures specific to Connaught.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't want to make this whole thing about speeding and stuff like that, because I do appreciate the report and the information that's in front of us, and it does take time to compile all this information, and I like where the mayor is going, and as well as Councillor Waxer on being able to differentiate some of that data, and just going back to Councillor Hall's comments about area roads, that might be an answer in some areas, but I've also noticed anecdotally that living on a street that's only 2 lanes and you have cars parked on both sides, and so essentially you only have 1 lane of traffic going one way down the middle. Deputy Mayor lives on a street like that. I used to live on a street like that. It doesn't seem to slow a lot of vehicles down at times. So, even in the downtown core, people go crazy. And I observe that more so from visitors than from residents in that area. So I just wanted to think that out.
This Councillor Demota, most of our residents right away.
Right. That's true. Sometimes down the wrong way.
May I have a motion to receive the report? Or is there any more discussion or direction to administration? Mayor Ireland.
I will make a motion that council accept the RCMP quarterly report for information and direct administration to ask questions and comments on to Sergeant Padesi as discussed. I'm assuming, I'm hoping, I'm trusting that Director Nadon knows what I'm talking about as we recorded those questions and concerns.
I will call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. New business, fruit trees on municipal property. I presume it's Ms. Director Braidhead.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor and Council. I just wanted to give a brief update on the status of the fruit trees and how we're dealing with the bears that are coming into the town site. After a few meetings with Parks Canada, we've decided that if Parks Canada deems a fruit-bearing tree, a problematic tree, a bear-attracting tree, and it's on municipal property, we've given them instruction to remove those trees. We're trusting their discretion. We've said we don't want to clear cut on all of the trees, but focus on the problematic ones and on the ones that are specifically attracting the bears. Since then, I believe that there's been 9 trees taken down out of the town site. I know that they took 4 down at the bulb on Willow by Benum, and a few individual trees on municipal property. I believe our last survey, we had 164 trees within the town site or within municipal properties. So we're going to slowly be pecking away at them going forward. And I guess that's pretty much all I have to report on those trees. We're working with Parks to make sure that we're not part of the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Braidhead. Questions from Mr. Braidhead? Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor through you to Mr. Greathead. Is there currently a list of recommended species to plant, and has that changed in recent years? And I ask this because it seems to me that some of the problem trees now are those ones that have purple leaves. They start green and turn purple. And it seems to me that they were recommended species to plant not so long ago. And until recently, my experience was, at least in my own yard, that bears left those alone, but not this year. And in fact, last night, I clearly had a bear in the backyard, and my neighbors had the same issue with the same tree. And so if residents are looking to help the situation, and planting trees is generally regarded as a good idea, is there a list of recommended species that are not going to attract bears?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. Yes, there is an approved planting list that's provided by Parks Canada. I'm not sure how recently it's been updated. I know that we follow their recommendations when we do tree replacements. This year, since we are and we have been losing a few fruit trees year over year, we have been looking for some of the approved flowering non-fruit bearing trees. So this year we purchased about 40 trees. I believe 20 of them were a Japanese lace lilac, which would be a flowering tree, and it's approved on the list, and also an Arctic pin cherry, which is a flowering non-fruit bearing tree. And so that's what we're trying to incorporate into our planting schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Braidhead. Do we need a motion to accept Mr. Braidhead's report?
Do we? Well, I move that committee receive Mr. Reidhead's report on fruit trees on municipal properties as information.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Braidhead. 7.2 Code of Conduct for Municipality Facilities. CEO Gibbon.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. Mr. Adele is here. She's been working on this with the community development team, and so she has the RFP sent for you.
Welcome, Mrs. Rudolph.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP and all council. The report in front of you is titled The Code of Conduct in Municipal Facilities, and it's following a meeting in March where council received correspondence regarding the Jasper Hockey League from a resident and directed administration to come back to a future committee meeting with recommendations. So since March, administration and specifically Manager Angela Franklin and Pete Bridge have worked on this quite a bit. Reviewed the documents that we currently have, the bylaws, policies, or procedures that currently exist. And they also did an external scan of what other municipalities do in regards to this topic. So the report in front of you in the background, it goes into just the different bylaws and policies that they reviewed. And they also looked through several documents from other cities and towns extensively to see what was kind of best practice or emerging practice in this area. All the documents, they really vary in format, but they kind of drive home a similar point, just zero tolerance for inappropriate behavior within a municipal facility. And then they take a different approach to defining appropriate or inappropriate behavior. Something they noticed is that there is, there's a bylaw. We currently have bylaw 070, which outlines expectations for the public's conduct in the public space within the town site. And then there's also a policy in place, but it has not been brought before council or adopted formally by council. The policy is administration's work to make the bylaw really easy to understand for the public. The recommendation in the report is that administration return to a future committee with a draft code of conduct in municipal facilities policy written in plain language for council to review. And of course, there's the option as well that we could use existing bylaws and policies and just work on the enforcement side of that, making sure staff understand and know what their authority is to enforce those bylaws. So a key consideration of council today is whether the current documentation is sufficient or whether council wishes to see administration draft more documentation to support appropriate behavior within municipal facilities. I'm available to answer any questions. We did feel that efforts to foster a safe and welcoming and inclusive environment free from hate, discrimination, or inappropriate or offensive conduct does enhance council's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's related to council's strategic priority of community health, promoting and enhancing recreational cultural opportunities and spaces. I'm available for any questions. I'll do my best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riddell, and thank you to Mr. Bridge and Mr. Stanton for all the work they put into this report. Questions? Councillor Demona.
No, I really appreciate the direction we're going and looking into existing policy, and I think that the recommendations here are good. Really good.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just looking at the bylaw we already have in existence, 070, with penalties of fines. I see that would be, I'm assuming, a ticket from a bylaw officer. First offense for fighting, second offense within 1 year. So am I assuming that you're not allowed back in that facility for a year? It's under Schedule A of the page 5 of 6 of the policy.
Are you referring to the bylaw?
Yes.
Sorry,
the bylaw, yeah.
I don't know whether Director Nadon would want to speak to that more. I would have to look at it more closely, kind of line for line in order to speak to it.
Just the first offense is $250 fine, second offense within 1 year, previous offense is $500 fine. So is that an assumption that you're not allowed back in that facility for 1 year, or is that what that means?
CEO Gibbon.
Thanks very much, Deputy Keller, MP. So Director Nadon may also have a comment, but I think that this is bylaw 70 is very broad. It's on all public spaces, which could include sidewalks, parks, whatever else. And And so it isn't set up to be specific to indoor municipal public spaces. It provides broad authority to our bylaw officers to issue tickets, which are typically fines. I don't believe it has any provisions to prohibit somebody from entering a public space, indoor or otherwise. Basically says if you behave badly, we're within our rights and have the authority under the bylaw to issue a ticket, which has a financial consequence, but I don't believe that it spells out any, or provides us the authority to ban somebody from attendance at any particular facility.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gibbon. Councillor Tomato.
Yes, thank you. Just for clarity, so we have a recommendation here with also with an option. And I'm just wondering if the recommendation portion, to clarify, is to have something that's postable in our facilities in plain language, and then also the opportunity to utilize the bylaw.
CEO Gibbon.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller, and for Councillor Devote. I think it really is sort of at least two parts. The bylaw provides us some authority. So yeah, I think administration's identifying the fact that if necessary, our bylaw officers have one tool that's available to them under the Code of Conduct bylaw. Under the Conduct in Public Spaces bylaw. So we can issue financial penalties. So that's a tool that's available to us, and we can exercise it if we wish. Not sure that it would sort of really address the matter that council, that brought this issue to the fore. The recommendation is to draft a code of conduct in municipal facilities policy. And then it's a question, and at the time when administration brings that forward, we would recommend council how we would activate that policy. An example that I can think of right now would be that all ICE users who book municipal facilities are required to commit, sign, or otherwise, somehow commit to following the intent of that policy, and that there'd be some consequences attached to when the ICE users don't follow that. Right. So it's a bit of putting the burden on the organizers and groups that are holding events in our facilities and saying, look, we have some expectations of you and your participants and patrons that they uphold this policy. And if you don't, then there's some consequence to, you as an organizer, you as the league, you as the whatever. So I think you can kind of suspect that that's how we would activate a conduct and municipal facilities policy. So one is the policy saying what we expect. And then at that time, when we bring that forward, we'd be able to give some advice on how would we compel people or not necessarily compel, but, direct people that they need to comply with that policy. Because having a policy, I think is, you said yourself, Councillor, about having a policy or a law that isn't enforced, it's kind of the same as not having one. And so I think the next step for administration will say, okay, so this is the type of behavior that we want, and we have examples that we can work from. That's the research that has been done. The next step is to say, okay, so how do we want to compel people to act in accordance with that policy and that expectation? And that would come forward if council gives us the recommendation to draft the policy. We can speak about how we would activate it.
Councillor Tomato.
So potentially, the policy could make reference to the penalties in the bylaw 070. Just as part of the enforcement.
That's an example. Another example of how administration is working to try to manage public behaviors. It's really just even letting the public know what tools are available to us, what potential consequences there are. A good example of this is the work that community development and other parts of the team have done at Lions Park over the course of the summer. It's not a surprise. We regularly get noise complaints from the residents in the area adjacent to Lions Park. And there were suggestions anywhere from give them tickets to lock the fences to prevent access. The approach that we chose to take this year was to increase signage to give people a bit of a reminder about being respectful in the area of the neighbors and to identify what things are possible within our current authority. So if you go by Lions Park, you'll see relatively new signs that are posted at all the entrances that remind participants, users of that space, to be respectful, and sort of make a suggestion of if, there's not respectful behavior, things could happen, the municipality may have to close this facility. Or individuals could be subject to fines under the bylaw. So it's sort of a soft approach to sort of reminding people of what their obligations are and reminding people of what potential consequences are. That's an example of how we can use tools that already exist. And the creation of a conduct of municipal facilities policy could leverage that kind of approach as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Mayor Arlen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Councillor. Through you to Ms. Riddell, I appreciate the report. I just have some questions just for clarity mostly. If a draft code of conduct comes forward, would we expect that to include the administrative procedures? Because as was just discussed, it's the enforcement of the policy that matters. And so as the policy is developed, I think I would be interested in seeing the administrative procedures and how the policy is to be implemented. So would that be an expectation that they would come forward together? And appreciating that typically administrative procedures are for administration, but I think in these circumstances, council would be interested to know how this might roll out initially, and then changes over time could be left to the discretion of the CAO.
Mr. Gibbon.
Deputy Mayor Keller, MP for Mayor Ireland. I think you've hit on it, that given the level of interest there is in the community in this issue, and that it's somewhat subjective when we're talking about behaviors, I think you would likely see more of those. You would see a continued practice of administration, including more details in a council policy. I think in the past, council policy has been very broad. Behave well, and then the details were in the admin procedure. I think it would make sense to include some of these operational aspects in the council policy so that you get a direct hand in setting those expectations and consequences, rather than sort of saying, behave well or administration will deal with you. It would be council saying, behave well, here's what we expect, and here's the consequences that we as council can stand behind. So we would likely integrate more of those admin procedure type items in the council policy so you have a direct hand in control.
Thank you for that. If I may continue, and similar to the discussion we recently had with respect to respect and dignity, just expanding the meaning of the term facilities, I think is important. So maybe that is already understood, but there are all sorts of public spaces, and they might be, well, they would be covered now by conduct in public spaces. But if we're going to have a policy, I think I'm hoping that it would be sufficiently broadly worded that we might take action if teams break out into fisticuffs in a parking lot, for example. Not necessarily in the facility, so not something specific to an arena, but it would encompass the soccer field and the ball diamonds and other public places. So not just facilities, but I leave that to the drafters. And the final comment that I would make is with respect to strategic relevance. And while I appreciate that this is directly tied to community health, and it's important to recognize that, I think as we develop a policy, if we are taking a broader look at strategic relevance, it might help nuance the policy. So for example, from my own review of strategic priorities, I think a critical component of this is relationships. And under that, there is communication and communicate and engage with residents. And also under relationships, a recognition that we welcome the expertise, innovation, and creativity of local groups and associations. So a perfect opportunity to engage, just as we were engaged by a member of the public, but engage with the broader public in helping find creative solutions to a community problem. And then finally, the other matter of strategic relevance from my perspective is that this will become a staff issue. And so under organizational excellence, we look both to empower staff and to entrust staff. And so I'm hoping I see elements of that in the policy that comes forward. Because I think at the end of the day, there is going to be a tremendous burden on staff to deal with the issue. We hope that there will be some self-policing by users of the facilities and those who manage teams and individuals. But at the end of the day, we are going to have to, I think, empower and entrust our staff. And so it will be interesting to see how that wording comes out in the policy, because they have to be able to enforce, for want of a better word, but we have to protect them as well. And that's going to be an interesting challenge for you, I think. Thank you. Those were my comments.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Councillor Demona.
Well, I'm glad the mayor brought all those up, and you know what, I don't want to say, I was going to say the same thing as he is, or he did, and often he says it more eloquently and more precise. I did look at our strategic plan and noted some of the things that the mayor said, and I'm glad that he made reference to those. One thing that I did want to say is, you know, I wanted to touch what the mayor did on, you know, facilities. I was going to bring that up, and I'm glad, because we just watched where I got to see a lot of the community play ball this weekend using our diamonds, and it seemed to be quite harmonious. And sometimes there are heated moments. But I don't want the hockey community to feel like they're getting picked on. You know, some of the supporters of the other side, you know, understood and said this is a contact sport, and sometimes people get heated. And so, and that's kind of one of the issues that arise here. And, you know, although that there's the outdoor sports and everything like that, that aren't contact sports for the most part, people seem to get along differently. So, we are going to be putting staff into different positions, and because the arena is kind of more confined than being outside, we don't have a lot of staff when there are outside events going on, so not as easy to observe. I was going to say patrol, but observe. So definitely those considerations, but it should be what we're designing here for an overall kind of concept on all our facilities. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demona. More questions? Comments? Councillor Brunson.
I just wanted to make the comment that I think that it's a great idea to have the various teams sign off on the code of conduct. That I think it does create some bench strength to this by doing so.
Councillor Demona.
I agree, and I think that should go to all users, anybody that's renting the rink out or participating in local leagues and such. But having said that, I'm ready to make a motion unless somebody felt more compelled to do so.
Go ahead.
Okay, I move the committee direct administration to return to a future committee of the whole meeting with a draft code of conduct in municipal facilities policy written in plain language for review.
Any debate on the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Mrs. Ruta. Reallocations of capital funds, and I believe it's Director Grayhead.
Your worship, or sorry. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Hey, could I suggest we'll probably get through the agenda before 12:30, but if we could do a 5-minute recess, I think we could probably use that to get through the next little bit.
I will call a recess till 11:40. Welcome back, everybody. I'll call the meeting back to order at 11:40, and I will call Mr. Greathead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The request for decision in front of you today, I want to reallocate some of our capital funds first off, when during capital budget was approved in 2023, there were two items: the loader-mounted snow blower that we use for winter clearing. We were able to purchase that for $74,995, and we had a budget line of $150,000 available for that. The second item was a snowcat that we use for maintaining the snow dome. We had $120,000 available for that, and we were able to purchase it and have it delivered for $92,000. So that leaves a balance on those two items of $103,000. Now, during this year, budget planning, the concept of increasing our level of service with sidewalk cleaning, as well as we've had some user groups, enter into formal agreements for snow clearing. And in order to be able to keep up with the workload, I propose that we take $80,000 of that $103,000, those two underspent items, and purchase a new crab steer tractor and add that to the fleet. So this will be a secondary one. We were looking at replacement of this item in a few years, but right now, if we were able to add this to our fleet, that would help us through the winter. The crab steer that we're looking at is going to be a little more rugged, and so it would be about 2-3 model sizes up from our current crab steer. This one includes a hydraulic broom assembly. The rest are PTO driven mechanical assemblies, and those mechanical assemblies we find they're very fragile. Working out in the cold, sometimes if an operator hits one of the flower boxes or a curb too hard, it's not surprising that we do $8,000 worth of damage to a broom. We go through about 4 brooms a year on that. So with a hydraulic broom as opposed to a mechanical broom, we figure that our reliability is going to increase and our operating costs are going to be reduced. And another item that we would like to reallocate funds for is the purchase of a 10-ton dump truck to supplement our fleet. Currently, this year we were successful in hiring experienced heavy equipment operators, and we've been really able to put more of a shift on doing work in-house and taking on some construction projects in-house as well. So administration is seeking to delete the purchase of the 4x4 1-ton pickup truck replacement for $100,000 and the purchase of a 3/4-ton pickup truck for $70,000, and use that $170,000 to purchase an additional 10-ton dump truck. And our budget we would be exceeding the $170,000. We're able to do that. So the recommendation in front of council is that council direct administration proceed with the purchase of the new tractor and the implements for winter sidewalk maintenance. I'll go a little bit of a breakdown too on the tractor cost. A new one right now is $56,000 for the tractor, and then by the time we get the drop spreader for the salt and the broom, will be close to $80,000. And then the second recommendation is the council direct administration to proceed with the purchase of a 10-ton dump truck for snow equipment operations, and that would greatly reduce our contractor reliance and improve our service level. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Greathead, and I love when we save money. Congratulations. I'm just curious on the snowblower and the snowcat. So do we buy them secondhand, or you were just able to get a lease back? Or I'm just curious the drop in price.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. When we went for the snowcat, we knew we were going to be buying used. We know that they're over $300,000 now. So we figure our limited hours, we would be able to get something used as well. The secondary snowblower that we bought, we did get a great deal on that one. It's a refurbished one. It's a year older than the first one that we had bought, but it had less wear, less hours on it than ours does. So we had that refurbished and delivered for $75,000.
Great, thank you for that. Questions from council? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Murphy. I see the part of the funding here is deleting a purchase of a couple of trucks. Will those trucks reappear in 2025, 2026 capital, or these, we're not requiring these trucks in the next couple of years?
Deputy Mayor, to answer Councillor Melnick's question, we don't anticipate coming back with these two items for some time. Our fleet's getting in pretty good shape. We've been working on standardizing it, and we don't put a lot of miles on our fleet. That's one thing, is we're more prone to lot rot or rusting out as opposed to miling out a vehicle. So we've been maintaining our fleet. We do have in-house mechanics now, and they're being well looked after. So as we discussed this with the management team and operations and this reallocation of funds, I wanted to make sure that we were in a good spot, and I'm not going to say delete this year and then come back next year. We're prepared to live with this decision.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Councillor Demota.
The way I read it, I didn't see that we were losing vehicles. We're just downsized a 1 ton to a 3/4 ton. And were we losing a vehicle on this one? Like, as far as the budget was concerned in capital replacement?
Deputy Mayor, to answer Councillor Demota, no, we were, well, the two pickup trucks that we were looking at were replacement vehicles. We're going to be able to stretch our use out of our current fleet, and it's the urgency isn't there for those two items. It is for the 10-ton pickup truck, though, or 10-ton dump truck. We also have 3 pub trailers in stock that are in our fleet as well. So we actually have an extra trailer without a truck to pull it around with.
Right, I misunderstood the wording there, but I get it now. Thank you.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. Through you to Director Braidhead, and I'm sorry to belabor this, but I do have a concern. Administration would have convinced council of the need to add the 1-ton truck and the 3/4 ton truck to get that $170,000 in the budget. Now, the suggestion is that be reallocated and those items aren't necessary, and that's fine. I can understand that, but they were necessary not so long ago. And it's just sort of a general concern that council relies absolutely on administration for information on this. And it seems curious that something that was required last year is not required at all and won't be required in the foreseeable future. Clearly a 10-ton dump truck does not replace a combination of a 1-ton and a 3/4 ton. So different uses entirely. So is there some use that is not going to get addressed, or is it simply that we now have in-house capacity to maintain the existing fleet and put it to use?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe a lot of the vehicle purchases were just, listed as replacement, life cycle replacement. And they're kind of phased in. That's typical with any fleet operations, is just have a retirement plan and a phasing out and a replacement plan. Now, having gone through, we had the support of council last year for new positions within operations. That's made a difference, quite a difference in our approach to work. What we're going to do and who's going to be in what vehicles and where they're going to be tasked. So this is just more of a modification of our work practices. And I just want to make sure that we're efficiently using the equipment. If I don't see a need to replace the vehicle at this point, I would not advocate to replace a vehicle just on the arbitrary fact of the number of years. So again, we've been working to make sure that we're maintaining our vehicles. We've upped our level of service, and I believe that all the vehicles in our fleet, right? Well, we still have a lot that I will come back to council for, like the minivans that we're still running around. We do have a lot of 15-year-old vehicles, but we're gonna make sure that we prioritize our equipment purchases to be able to provide the best service for the community. So that's really, it's just a shift in our work philosophy, the work we're doing.
And with respect to the 10-ton dump truck, is it exclusively for snow removal, or can it be adapted to other uses that we have throughout the year?
Your worship, I think that would be used all the time. I see it specifically for snow removal. I'd like to have it here for this winter, if possible. And this would not, as well, not be a brand new vehicle. This would be something that's been moderately used, broken in, good shape. Not going to be a problem. I'm not asking for a $400,000 dump truck. But we figure that we can get something. We've done some market research. We figure that we can plan something within a 3 to 4 year age, and that is service for another 10 or 15.
And there will be at least notional payback if we purchase the 10-ton dump truck. It will save us on contracting costs over time. Otherwise, there would be occasions when we would have to contract. Do you know what that payback period would be? Like, how long would it take us to incur $170,000 in contracted snow removal, for example? Just for the truck, not for a loader.
And your worship, since we got the snow blower and we've been doing more work in house, we've been saving hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Our contracted out services, we've shown that reduction.
Thank you.
Councillor Pomona.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller Henry. And through you to Mr. Greathead, maybe more of a comment followed by a question. But at one point when we were looking at other vehicles that you wanted to get through the community and for refuse and recycling, you had a business plan and the cost savings and all that. And because we are saving money here, it's a little bit more justifiable. But I think I don't want to add more work to you or Ms. Malinchuk by any means. But I think sometimes it's worthwhile exercise to show the community what they're saving. And as far as going up for tax requisition or the burden on, these types of initiatives. And I appreciate it. Ever since you got here, you've been looking at ways to make things more efficient, and you have. It's nice to see that also documented so that we can show, hey, we just saved $100,000 in 5 years because we went in this direction. That, again, I'm not saying that we need to do that, but sometimes when the asks are needed and a business plan is required, even if we're saving money, it's still, I think, a good idea to show the community like some of the measures we've taken and how they're, they're getting quality service at a reduced rate. I guess there is no question there. I don't know if, maybe if could that be feasible in the future, considering the resources we have?
Deputy Mayor, to speak to Councillor Tomo's question, the hardest thing about budgeting for snow removal is we are dependent on the weather. We don't know what's going to hit us. I know that when I started here, the windrows used to sit on the road for 3 weeks. They're gone in a day now. Yeah. So, I think that we've vastly improved our service. I know that we've had comments from the fire department and emergency services and the ambulances saying that the town's much safer to get around in with this new efficiency that we found. So I'm just wanting to capture on that. It's hard for me to quantify what we would save year over year. It's been different every year that I've been here. 5 winters now that we've been going through this. So I really don't have a finite number that I could point to.
Well, I think
we've had the blower for X amount of the season, 4 seasons, right? So, and we've had to rent a dump truck for that amount of time, and or several. But now we're going to need one less if we're going in this direction. So I guess at the average of 4 years, how much did we spend on the rental of that dump truck? I'm sure that number could be there somewhere. I'm not sure. I don't want to create a lot of back paperwork and stuff, but I think that's just kind of what I was looking for, right? So if we're spending $170,000 on the truck, I think maybe a few seasons that's already been paid for. But, you know, I think that's good. That, you know, if the community knows that and we're making sound decisions on their behalf, I think it's worthwhile having that information there. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Demoto. Questions? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. I will make a motion with just a slight change. And when I finish wording the motion, perhaps Mr. Greathead or Mr. Gibbon can tell me whether it makes any difference from your perspective. My motion would be that council direct administration to reallocate capital funds to proceed with the purchase of a new tractor and implements for winter sidewalk maintenance, and B, with the purchase of a 10-ton dump truck for municipal operations. And I make that slight change just to recognize that it's not new funding, it's a reallocation of funding, and it's built into the motion.
Mr. Gibbon, Mr. Greathead, you're okay with the wording? Councillor Wexler?
I wondered if we needed to include the deletion of the 2 trucks in the motion, because it's only in the body of the request.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I think so.
Accept that. Ms. Acorn, do you have everything within the motion? Do you need a reread?
I can give it to you. That council direct administration to delete the purchase of a 4x4 1-ton pickup truck and the purchase of a 3/4-ton pickup truck, and to reallocate capital funds to permit the purchase of a new tractor and implements for winter sidewalk maintenance, and the purchase of a 10-ton dump truck for municipal operations.
Any debate? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. I just appreciate that the motion was made to purchase these 2 pieces of equipment. We still have a saving of $23,000. The crab steer being purchased at in or around 80,000 comes from the savings from previous purchases, but then the truck, the new 10-ton truck, is coming from the deletion of 2 existing capital programs. If the truck can't be purchased for the 170, does the motion, the way it reads right now, allow for additional dollar amounts to be able to purchase that dump truck? I just want to make sure we're clear. You know, right now the wording is not to exceed 170. Whatever comes in at 180 or 175, does that mean it comes back to council?
Mr. Greathead.
Deputy Mayor, our purchasing policy allows us, I believe it's 10% variance on a capital item without having to come back to council. But I'm quite confident with our checking into the market and what's out there right now that we will be able to buy the vehicle we need at a limit of 170.
Thank you, Mr. Greathead. That I'm satisfied with that answer because the projects, if we do come in higher than the 170, there's that 23,000 in already pre-approved capital to cover off any additional dollar amounts that might be necessary. Thank you for that.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Now for additional item, Forest Resort Improvement Association of Alberta event application, and I'll call Ms. Nadon.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for entertaining our request to add this item to the agenda. So the request before council today is that committee recommend council approve an application to the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta for grant funding for the new 10-year wildfire mitigation strategy. So this is here to be hopefully recommended to council for September 5th, and a council resolution to support the application as part of the application process. So we do require that to submit as part of our application, and we are working under a bit of a tight deadline. The deadline is September 11th for submission. So in order to meet the September 5th regular meeting timeline is why we've added this on today. And essentially, as outlined in the background, there has been quite a bit of fire smart work taking place around town since 2004. We've benefited from a strong relationship with Parks Canada as some of those lands fall within their jurisdiction in terms of tree removals and the environment, generally speaking, is a Parks Canada jurisdiction. And what happened at the end of the 2022-2023 season is that the work was concluded on the previous wildfire mitigation strategy. So there was a document in place that outlined all the areas that should be treated, and which treatment specifically should be applied is a big part of this project. And so we are looking at applying for grant funding to get a new wildfire mitigation strategy in place. So develop a new 10-year plan that will guide the future maintenance of existing units, but also potentially new units that would need to be added. And as presented under the discussion, we were dealing with the pine beetle devastation around 2015, and looking ahead to 2024, we're now dealing with those red trees being gray, those trees falling, becoming ground fuel. So our situation has changed quite a bit, and this new plan would assess how that impacts the work that should be completed. So the total grant application request is for $40,000, is what we think will be sufficient to hire a consultant and build a new plan, a new 10-year plan. The project manager would be the fire chief, and the way this works is we work in collaboration with Parks Canada, but this is very much a municipal project. So responsibility for the project itself and the funding and the project management all lies with the municipality of Jasper, and Fire Smart is still very much part of the fire chief's job description. So I'm thankful for Chief Conte's leadership on this file. He's been working closely with the fire team at Parks Canada. And yeah, so we're here to request formal support from council in the form of a motion at the September 5th meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Don. Questions from Mr. Don? If we do not get the grant, will you have to come back to council then to make it part of 2024 budget?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I believe if we are not successful with the grant funding, I think it is a project that should still move forward and that we would bring forward for funding by council. We have been quite successful in our applications with FREA previously. We are working with existing documentation, and it's being enhanced with our new documentation. So we have we're optimistic that we will get the grant funding, but we won't find out until the end of the year. So the deadline to submit the application is September 11th, and we will find out before the end of 2023 whether our application was successful or not.
Thank you for that, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. A question for Mr. Donna is there a need for a council or a committee recommendation to council, or could this not be addressed by way of a direction from committee to simply have administration make the application? and then add to that, and if successful, a direction to administration to proceed with the development of a new 10-year wildfire mitigation strategy. I understand that there is a time constraint, but this is not an application that council is going to make. The administration will make the application to RIA. And so is there a need for this process, or could we simply direct administration today to go ahead and apply for the grant, and if you're successful, apply it to the development of a new plan?
Deputy Mayor, through to Mayor Ireland. I did go over that with Chief Conti in terms of making sure that the motion that we were bringing forward actually met the requirements from FRIA. And it does say a council resolution is what's required to support the application. I think and that's what guided our approach to go for a formal motion at a council meeting is, I believe, the most straightforward and safe way to go about it to make sure that we do meet that requirement. So it is a application criteria to have a motion from council.
Any other questions from Ms. Nadone? Councillor Baxter.
I'm happy to make the motion. That committee recommend council approve an application to the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta, RIA, for grant funding toward a new 10-year wildfire mitigation strategy.
Any questions? Comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Nadone. Back to you. Back to you, Mr. Gibbon, motion action list.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. There are some recommended changes, I believe, noted in the attached package. The fruit trees on municipal property, as you heard from Director Greathead, administration continues to work with Parks Canada, and if council is comfortable that administration has the latitude to manage those trees in the process Director Greathead described, certainly we would continue to do so just on an ongoing basis and really prioritizing the problematic areas and sort of working our way through that backlog. Council may at some point wish to discuss the issue of fruit trees on private property. That's not actually what's in this motion on the motion action list. And I believe all the other items are relatively up to date. You can see that we're recommending to remove the Jasper Hockey League item. There was a report brought today. There was a new motion, and so that motion would replace this one. The municipally controlled corporation, that has occurred at the last regular council meeting, and so that item could be removed. And I believe all the other items are currently on track with dates. So it's lining up for a busy September. But those are the recommended changes to the motion action list.
Thank you, CEO Gibbon. Do you have any questions on the motion action list for CEO Gibbon? No. Councillor Melnick.
Hearing no questions for Mr. Gibbon or administration, I would like to make the motion that committee approve the updated motion action list with the removal of the 3 items identified in the presentation.
Councillor Melnick, call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Councillors, upcoming meetings. Councillor Demora.
I just wanted to point out, I didn't know whether to bring this up under upcoming events, but it more so falls under the meeting things that I believe on Wednesday, September 6th, community conversations are going to restart for the season. Just having the summer off. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. And participation from the community is also welcome. So, please look where you can participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demora. Any other communities? Ireland. Okay. We're going ahead to upcoming events. We have the Jasper Yellowhead Historical Society Homecoming, August 27th, 29th. I do believe the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce AGM is now September 7th. No, September 27th. And I do believe most of council will be at AM. I can attend. I will be in town because I'm not going to AM. We have Jasper Crisis Team fundraising tournaments September 8th. I believe Mayor Ireland, Councillor Hall, Councillor Wilson, and some other participating. Jasper Folk Music Festival, September 8th and 9th. The Alberta Tourism Advocacy Summit is in September, the Calgary Telus Convention Centre. I'm not sure if anybody from council is attending.
I am still hopeful to attend. It's awkward because it's in Calgary and the next day AM starts in Edmonton, but I can probably manage that if I can manage the extra day that week. So I'm looking at registering for the Alberta Tourism Advocacy Summit. It was a really useful event to attend. Well, I think it was earlier this year. Maybe it was last fall. I can't remember the date that it was last in Edmonton, but it was a really big event.
I am available that date if you cannot attend Ireland. Then we have the Alberta Municipal Convention and Trade Shows, September 27th, 29th in Edmonton. And I believe our community Christmas party is December 15th. Mr. Gibbons sent out a notice, so I know many people in the community are excited about that. Is there any other upcoming events for Ireland?
Earlier this morning, just as I was preparing to come here, I saw a couple of emails about a sod turning. And I just don't know what that's about. September 6th, I believe, and maybe September 7th as well. Mr. Gibbon, can you?
Your Worship, administration is working with a contractor on the activity center renovation project, and they wanted to have some formal, although we're well underway, as the community council knows, they want to have a bit of a formal ceremonial kickoff to that project, and so council members have received some invitations. That's what that would be about, and I believe Ms. Acorn has sent that out on behalf of the contractor. So not necessarily a public event, but more of a sort of formal kickoff and full opportunity to help recognize that the project is well underway.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon, for that. Any other events? Okay, seeing as none. At 12:14, is anybody willing to make a motion to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Malnick, thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. I just want to thank all the members of the public that have tuned in. I believe we do not have a meeting again now till Tuesday, September 5th. That is next week is the Tuesday, and we do not have committee of the whole or council meeting. Thank you, everybody, and I wish everybody a great day.